Welcome to my channel, Rise of Edge Crusher. I'm an Overwatch coach with a specific focus on working with bronze and silver players. And this past October, I made a video talking about the Seita Scrim workshop code and how it teaches bad habits to lower ranked players. Contenders coach Spilo put out a video last month in which he watched my video and shared his views on what I was saying. Based on his critique of my analysis, I talked to a lot more players and teams outside of my org. People that I'm not working with as a coach, who maybe aren't as attuned to my coaching style and are less likely to agree with me. While I haven't changed my mind that the Seita preset teaches bad habits to a lot of teams, I have also realized that for some teams and players, it can be helpful, and it can help them to get more benefit out of their scrims. This video is going to further explore how the Seita code teaches bad habits, how they can be mitigated, how some teams benefit from the code, and what the difference is between these types of teams and players. It will hopefully allow teams who benefit from the Seita code and teams who find their practices disrupted by it to find a mutually beneficial middle ground, as well as allow teams who are building bad habits from it to mitigate those bad habits. Both my original video and Coach Spilo's critique of it will be linked in the description. Spilo pointed out that the goal of a scrim is to have the opportunity to discuss as a team and learn from your mistakes rather than playing as many maps as possible. Quality over quantity, as he describes it. I asked players on organized teams from rank bronze to diamond, inside and outside of my org, what they consider to be a quality scrim. What factors do they feel allows them to get the most out of a scrim? I learned that players in my org and in other teams and orgs who are opposed to the Seita code prefer the scrim to move at a steady pace with a minimum of pauses and interruptions. They don't like pauses during a map, including in between rounds, and feel that these should be reserved only for when they're actually needed, such as someone severely lagging out, gets disconnected, or has an emergency and is forced to step away from their computer. They think that pauses for coaching should take place between maps, as I do, and should usually last no longer than 5 minutes, although the majority of these players, including me, are flexible with some longer breaks between maps. These players find that having a longer pause between rounds causes them to lose focus and is difficult for them to recover from. They end up playing in an uncoordinated way as a result of that lost focus. These are typically teams and players with established strategies who decide on what they're doing in 10 seconds and are ready to go the instant the spawn door opens on the default time of 45 seconds. Whether their strategy is good, bad, or in between, they run with it and they feel it out. After the map, the coach talks about their strategy, its strengths and weaknesses, and what they did right or wrong with it. Having that conversation between rounds, instead of at the end of the map, disrupts these players and throws them off their game. Having extra time between rounds as a result of the Seita code does not add quality to their scrim experience. Having it forced on them actually detracts from the quality of their scrim experience. But I also learned that players who like the Seita code and do feel like it improves the value of their scrim as a learning experience have some good reasons for that as well. These players tend to feel trapped by habit and benefit from being corrected in the moment as opposed to after the fact. They find it easier to apply what the coach is teaching them to do if the instruction comes as soon as possible after the mistake, between rounds being a better option for them than waiting until the map has finished. For these teams, the Seita code and its option to add extra time does add to the quality of the scrim experience and allows them to learn more and get more out of their coaching. This ties into something that Spilo said when he critiqued my original video. I said that if teams can't decide on a composition, know their strategy, and be set up and ready to go within the default 45 seconds, practicing that until they can do it needs to be their highest priority. Using a workshop code to give yourself extra time isn't an acceptable solution. You need to train with the default time and own your mistakes until you can do it comfortably every time. Spilo argued that this doesn't give the team a chance to learn and practice their strategy. He argued that the purpose of a scrim is to practice, not to simulate tournament conditions, and that if a team needs extra time to explain their strategy or to come up with a better strategy, it should be allowed. Now, I think Spilo has a good point there. I don't think he's wrong, but I would never coach the players and teams in my org that way, unless I was working with an adaptive player who actually needed that extra time and couldn't function without it. This comes down to a fundamental difference in coaching styles that I don't believe has a simple right or wrong answer. My approach to esports coaching is structured after traditional Japanese martial arts. That's where I was first taught discipline, leadership, and how to be a mentor to others. It served me well working in emergency management, and now I'm bringing those same lessons into Overwatch as a coach and as a leader. There are 3 administrators in my org, and all 3 of us have some kind of martial arts background and a goal of bringing that focus on respect and discipline into esports. The whole idea and approach to that is a topic for another video, but my point here is that in traditional martial arts, there's a very strong mentality of leader has the ultimate responsibility, and the best way for someone to learn is to put them in a situation that they're not quite ready for and let them struggle until they rise to the occasion. So when I see a team captain, the person who's leading the team, unable to have their team organized, their strategy prepared, and ready to go within the allowed time, my response to that is, you are the leader. This is your responsibility, and you need to be practicing until you're comfortable with it. And of course, if they don't know what to do, if they don't understand the strategy, whatever gameplay knowledge that they're struggling with, I'll break down some options for them and explain the strengths and weaknesses of each one. We'll have conversations between the maps or before or after the scrims as many times as they need to. We'll go over their VODs or VODs of my team running the strategies at a higher level, whatever will help them. But when a map in the scrim starts, it's on the team captain, as leader of that team, to take charge and make the calls without my help. And that's an important experience for them. And in my opinion, teaching strong leadership within our org is more important than the team having extra time to feel extra comfortable that they understand their strategy. But like I said, I do think that Spilo has a fair point when he argues against this method of coaching, and I definitely think there are players who would benefit more from his approach. My org in particular focuses on teaching leadership along with good gameplay, which is unusual in esports, and I think it needs to become more common. Leadership in esports is severely lacking at all levels of play, but again, that's a topic for another video. So, there are players whose scrim quality is disrupted by the Seita preset, players whose scrim quality is enhanced by the Seita preset, and players for whom it doesn't make a difference. When I made my original video, I was only aware of the players who found it disruptive, and players who insist on using it because their coach likes to look at the stats. I've heard that too many times, and we'll talk about that later on. But at that time, I wasn't aware of the players who actually benefit from being corrected between rounds rather than waiting until the end of the map. So, 2 things there. Clearly, I hadn't done my research. And I also suspect that players who find the Seita code disruptive have a mindset that's just inherently closer to mine, they're more similar to me, and they're more likely to feel like my coaching is a good fit for them, and therefore to be in my org working with me. That's why, as Spilo put it in his video, my suggestion was to stop using the Seita code altogether. He compared it to chopping off one's leg because it's injured, and therefore eliminating all other options. I saw no benefit to the Seita code at that time, and as I've been presented with new information, my view has changed. Personally, I'm still not in favor of the Seita code for other reasons that I'll be explaining shortly, but seeing how it does benefit some teams, I'm open to discuss these issues and see if we can work out solutions for them, instead of just saying, this teaches bad habits, so we should get rid of it. It does teach bad habits as it is now. I still firmly believe that, but let's see if we can come up with some ways to work through this problem and get around it. When I've criticized the Seita code, I've always had a lot of people responding who are telling me, all these problems that you attribute to the Seita code are problems with bad coaching and or disorganized teams. They're not problems with the Seita code itself. And I agree with that. The problem is, the Seita code enables bad coaches and disorganized teams, and when one team is disorganized or has a bad coach, they end up disrupting the scrim for the other team too. Doing a couple of extra minutes of coaching or strategizing between maps is one thing. As I've talked about, I realize now there are valid reasons why teams might need that extra time to improve on what they're learning from a scrim, but the goal should still be to take as little extra time as possible while maintaining that quality of learning. The goal should be that eventually, the team is comfortable talking through their most pressing mistakes and upcoming strategy in as short a time as they can. Teams that aren't even trying for this, that just add 10 plus minutes to the clock and have a leisurely discussion about strategies that off tracks into talking about Pokemon and then back onto mistakes and strategies, that's a bad habit, relying on that extra time. There have been a frustrating number of teams, about half of those that I asked why they prefer to use the Seita code, who said, "Our coach wants it because he likes to look at the stats." I went over the problems with coaches who focus on statistics in my original video, and my view on that hasn't changed. At the highest level of play, where everything is moving incredibly fast, there are multiple coaches working with a team, and you're crunched for time, I think it can be helpful to use the stats to identify what areas of gameplay will need the most attention from you. I was taught this when I was learning to be a T3 coach, and I've also had friends who coached or played in contenders who used stats in this way. Spilo said when he responded to my video that he's never looked at stats at all and doesn't know any contenders coaches who do, so obviously this isn't even necessary. But we both agree that if a coach is going to use stats at all, it cannot be their primary focus. Good coaches will be paying attention to the players and their gameplay, not the statistics. Coaches who use the Seita code so that they can coach off of stats are highly unlikely to improve as coaches until they stop using that option or it's taken away from them. And there are a large number of those coaches out there, especially those working with lower ranked teams. This is a significant problem. So it's fair to say that the problems with bad coaches aren't caused by the Seita code, they're caused by bad coaches. But the Seita code enables bad coaches. With it becoming such a common practice to use the code, we really need to be taking a harder look at bad coaches and hold them to a higher standard. Only then is it okay to say that the Seita code doesn't contribute to these problems. My main concern when I'm making this video, though, isn't with bad coaches, but with the quality of scrims. The Seita code enhances the quality of scrims for some teams, while disrupting others. My goal here is to find a middle ground, where teams that fall into both of these categories can have a quality scrim experience. The simple solution is for teams who find the code disruptive to partner with each other for scrims, and teams who find the code beneficial to partner with each other for scrims. Of course, that won't always be possible, especially at lower ranks, so we then need to find a compromise where both types of teams can have a positive, good quality scrim experience. I suggest allowing up to 5 minutes of time between rounds, no more than that, added 1 minute at a time. I would like a standard to be implemented in the coaching and scrim community that coaching between rounds is usually capped at 2 minutes, but if a team needs 5 minutes to explain a particular strategy or mistake, it's alright to take it here and there. I have some concerns with how the Seita code changes HUD markers, which I talked about in my last video. Before I start talking about those here, I'd like to say that I am not an expert on the workshop system. I don't know if these changes would be possible, and while I dislike the preset, I do appreciate the amount of time, thought, and effort that Seita has put into creating it. Overwatch players often have a tendency to be quick to blame developers and content creators for mistakes and problems, without thinking that those people are human beings working very hard on a challenging project that they care about and have put a lot of effort into. I have my share of issues with the bugs and the game balancing, but I also recognize that the developers are human, they're doing the best they can, and that balancing and debugging the game is incredibly complicated and will never be perfect. I'm grateful for their hard work, that I get to enjoy Overwatch as much as I am frustrated with bugs and balance changes that I might not like. And this applies to Seita too. I find the preset disruptive, I find that it enables bad coaches, but Seita put a lot of effort into creating something that was meant to make the scrim experience better and more convenient, and I appreciate that, and I think that's really awesome. Seita also created an awesome 1v1 arena that most of the players in my org love. We warm up in there before our scrims a lot, so thank you Seita, and I understand that there's some issues with your scrim preset that may simply never be fixable. I still appreciate the effort you put into it. So, as I explained in my original video, the Seita preset removes the meter count from the payload progress indicator bar at the top of the HUD after the first team has attacked. Over time, this unconsciously trains players to stop looking for the information, and they become more susceptible to C9ing the point. Another issue with the Seita code is that, while it avoids having to reset the map by allowing the payload to move beyond a destination marker before the final checkpoint, that destination marker remains visible on the map, and there's that change in the intensity of the music as the payload approaches the destination marker, as if we were at the end of the game. In that moment, teams tend to forget that they're playing the full map, and they throw themselves and their ults at the payload when they should be resetting. Then the payload moves beyond the destination marker, and they realize, oh wait, it's Seita Scrim, we're playing the full map. Well, one day, when the teams have gotten used to this, they're going to be playing in a tournament, and they're going to see the payload approaching the destination marker set before the end of the map, and because the Seita code has subconsciously trained them into this, they're going to think, oh, it's not a big deal, we have time, and they won't play correctly for the situation. And again, I don't know if these interface issues are fixable, and therefore I don't want to criticize Seita for not fixing them, but because of the habits that they build in players who become too accustomed to them, I don't think the Seita code, as it is now, provides suitable practice over long term for teams who are planning to enter any tournaments. It just doesn't create a suitable environment for practicing tournament conditions, and over time, it builds bad habits in these teams that will negatively impact them in a tournament environment. But what do you guys think? Do you find the code disruptive, or do you find that it enhances your scrim experience? Does extra time between rounds help you develop better strategies and get more out of coaching? If you do find it helpful, do you think that capping the added time at 5 minutes would be reasonable and would still allow you to get that added quality? Do you think there's a better way to teach leadership than by forcing your team leader to adapt to a situation that they're not quite comfortable with? How do you think the Scrim preset could be improved? That concludes the video. Please leave any questions, thoughts, feedback for me in the comments below. I'm especially interested in hearing the opinions of players and team staff that I've never worked with in any capacity, who are less likely to have any similar mentality to me. Good luck in all your Overwatch conquests!